Hey there, welcome back to another video on music appreciation. Today's topic will be about postmodernism and more of what the ideals of postmodernism presented and what kind of goals it was trying to accomplish. And also a little bit of musical background as well as to this video's objective. Postmodernism itself was mostly a large reaction against intellectual assumptions and values that didn't really seem logical and didn't seem realistic enough to have a place in history in Western philosophy. And this was roughly from the 17th century to the 19th century. Of course, many of the doctrines characteristically associated with postmodernism are fairly described as more straightforward denial of any philosophical viewpoints that were more taken for granted, that were more accepted in today's life, as if because God put it there, and that's the way it's always been, like as this photo tells us, and then it progresses to modernism and then postmodernism. Though the original doctrines are still going to this day, some of the other ones are not taken as seriously as they would be. And this is for a couple of reasons. For one reason, there is more of an objective natural reality whose existence and properties are logically independent of human beings, of their minds, their societies, their social practices, or their investigative techniques. Postmodernism denies this idea as kind of a naive realism. Such reality as there is, according to postmodernists themselves, is more of a conceptual construct, an artifact of scientific practice and language. Another example of this is that descriptive and explanatory statements of scientists and historians can, in principle, be objectively true or false. Postmodernism also denies this viewpoint, which follows the rejection of an objective natural reality, and is sometimes expressed by saying that there is no such thing as truth. And one more final reason. Through reason and logic, with more specialized tools provided by science and technology, human beings are likely to change themselves and their societies for the better. It is reasonable to expect that future societies will be more humane and more enlightened and more prosperous than they are now. Postmodernism denies the Enlightenment movement of the 18th century in the faith of science and technology as instruments of human progression. Indeed, many postmodernists hold the misguided or unguided, if you'd wish to use that, pursuit of scientific and technological knowledge, leading to the development of technologies for killing on mass scales, such as the First World War and the Second World War. Some go as far as to say that science and technology and even reason and logic are inherently destructive and oppressive, because they have been used by sadistic and unmoral people, especially during the 20th century, to gain control of lands, to oppress, to destroy other people, to basically be a worldwide threat to everyone and everything around them. So you can clearly see that postmodernism is trying to be of a more realistic viewpoint. It's supposed to give you somewhat of a better idea of how the world is really supposed to work, and not just have it based on some assumption or have it based on a belief that may be taken for granted. Though there are doctrines, as I said before, that are still in play today that are taken literal and by faith. It is by their choice, including me, myself, and you can really see that there's supposed to be a black and white to this, and maybe even a little bit of a gray area as well. But from the objective point of what this is trying to present to us is that postmodernism is really trying to show us what is right, what is wrong, what is fiction, what is real, what is fact, and what is just assumed to be fact. And then, there's more and more reasons why we can go on and say that postmodernism is trying to clear up things that may be, seeing things as true when they could actually be false. But that's more of a different topic on more of a political level, I guess you could say, and a philosophical level as well, mostly. But the timeline that this took place in was around the 1970s and on to 2001, and a little bit afterwards. This term was used to describe musical, artistic, and philosophical trends that began around 1945. This kind of music expanded onto experimental trends that were kind of starting out of the modernist period, but it also acted as a reaction against those experiments. So this is basically in the same role as well. But there's also three different paths that postmodernism composers were drawn to during this time, during the 60s and 70s and onward. You have total surrealism and electronic music, which is more of compositional methods. You have the second one, which is minimalism, which is minimal control through deliberately randomized methods. And the third path is neo-romantic, which looks more to styles of the past and creates a pastiche of modern and of the olden, as well as to return to emotional expression through music. So you had a blend of these different kind of paths, especially with that last one, neo-romantic. With art and music, you would see a blend of old kind of music with new, and they tried to blend it all together, and they tried to make it more susceptible to society. They tried to make it more family friendly. They tried to make it more kind of a happy feeling to it, kind of more upbeat and more exciting. Tried to, give people a sense of, having fun, being happy, being, at peace of where you are in today's world. And especially in the 70s, 80s, and even towards the 90s, this would pursue on. And during the 2000s, it would still go on that route, but it would kind of take a toll for the worse on 2001. And more events like that would take place, and so on and so forth. But it wasn't really until 2020, when the epidemic started to happen, is when things really started to go downhill. And it wasn't really going to make a comeback until possibly around 2022, 2023. That's when things sort of calmed down. Even though there was wars going on still, there was still political conflict, there was still international conflict as well, and so on and so forth. But let's move on to one of these paths. You have total surrealism, and composers of this kind of music in the intonal style was created by Arnold Schoenberg. They adapted the surrealist techniques of pitch selection to elements like rhythm and dynamics. Total surrealism also influenced post-tonal theory with the creation of pitch class sets, which are specific groupings of pitches extracted from the 12 pitches of the chromatic scale. So you would have more of what is commonly referred to as numbers. So, and all 12 chromatic pitches of the octave would be C for 0, C sharp, D flat for 1, D for 2, D sharp, E flat for 3, E for 4, and so on and so forth. And if we continue on, we'll look at things such as electronic music. This was more of a total control of sounds being experimented on with electronic instruments and newly available recording technologies. Electronic instruments like the theremin, and later synthesizers were cutting-edge technologies that could be used to create new and exciting timbres. Magnetic tape, which began to be used for musical purposes in the 50s, found new ways to experiment and take control of those sounds. Composers could record instruments, speech, and ambient sounds, and could cut and splice tape together to create sounds unlike any that could be created with any standard acoustic instrument. And then you have music such as chance music, which was known as an electoric music and intermittency. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Relinquished the control sought by serious composers and created music based on quote-unquote chance or partially randomized events. You had composers such as John Cage using a variety of these methods to create his version of electoric music, basing many of his processes on his experiences in Eastern philosophy. Cage's quote-unquote music of changes was an ancient Chinese divination text called the First Qing and is used to map out possible pitches in rhythms and in dynamics. A die is then rolled to determine the choices of which pitches, rhythms, and dynamics would be available to use. The method could look very similar to total surrealism, but really the goal was to relinquish ego, control, and more kind of discover and create a form of creation that would exist out of their personal biases and habits. So it was really kind of like a discovery, more of an exploring type of way of creating music, just by listening to certain notes and certain rhythms, and that way you can create your own kind of style. We'll go to Neo-Romanticism. Now this is a big one. The postmodern period had felt more compelled to pursue extreme experimentalism of previously converted styles. Some, like the neoclassicists of the modern period, have chosen to reach back more to historical music, creating more modern versions of pastiches. But we now refer to these as the Neo-Romanticism movement, which returned tonality and relied on the formal conventions of previous eras, and used quotations from earlier music in their compositions. Composer Ellen Tuffy Zwilich drew on earlier classical forms in her Symphony No. 1, which was the first composition by a woman to be awarded the Pulitzer Prize in Music. These pastiche-style compositions, composers drew on world music and popular music as well. For example, a Chinese-American composer named Chen Yi incorporated traditional Chinese harmonies and folk songs in many of her compositions. I'd like to also further note that the art was a bit more cartoony, and it started to have more colors involved with it. especially when the first color television was being used and produced at this time. You would have more of a animated kind of way of art and TV shows. Life started to be a little bit more brighter and seemed a little bit more peaceful at times, even though still there was conflict, there was still political agendas going on in the background, but it seemed like in postmodernism this was more of a peaceful kind of era, and you could even debate this and compare it to timelines such as modernism and other eras before this, but people nowadays still say that the 70s were the best, the 80s were the best, the 90s were the best, and with some of these arguments you could say that, maybe they're right. Moving forward, my two songs that I've picked, the first one is from Luc Ferrari, and it is called Histoire du plaisir et de la désolation of 1981. And my second piece that I've chosen is from Minoru Miki, Recipe for 20-string koto, which is an extract. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that it was informative. If I may have leaving anything out, please leave that in the comments section that you may have wanted to hear something else about. I will do that for my next video. But I hope you all have the great rest of your day, and I hope you take care. Alright, I'll see you later.